You've had a lot of information already today, so thank you for still being here. Necessarily, I'm also going to speak about the Swiss system, so we'll recognize some things that others also have said, but I hope that there are some new aspects to it, especially because I'm a researcher. I'm going to add a lot of numbers. No, just some numbers, right? So I'll try to make this interesting. I hope. The topic, of course, is we have different names here, like dual system, work-based learning, industry-based learning. We always talk about a Swiss system when I talk about work-based learning. So these are three of the occupations that you want to pilot in Latvia to try to implement a system that is even more work-based than the one that you have. Now, one thing you need to know is that in Switzerland, this has been going on for a really long time. So for us, it was easy in that sense that we had this almost like since the Middle Ages. So it was the guilds who invented the classical apprenticeship. And then the modern Swiss state tried to integrate that into the education system. And it's not because they thought it's so great we have to keep it. It's just because our state was so weak that he wasn't able to make it all school-based, so he had to deal with it. And now we're very happy and think it's a super modern system. But in fact, originally it really was that the economy was simply stronger than the state. And that's why we kept on doing what people had been doing for a long time. So these are old pictures of similar occupations. They're not really about training, but you see that these occupations have existed for a long time. Of course, there are newer ones that we create as new occupations, but many of the occupations have a long history. Even the tractor, this is from the 20s. It's a Swiss product, was a very modern tractor at the time. So, the basic foundation of our system was already there. And the trick is always, how can we update it? How can we supplement learning in the firms in a way that is modernized, in a way that it fits modern demands? So first I'm going to talk about the firms because they're really key, that you have heard many times already today. So I talk shortly about firms' role and then about why they train. That also we have heard about. Your colleague has already presented many of these aspects. We've tried to also measure them. So we asked a lot of firms about why they train, calculated some figures. That's where the numbers come in. So I'm also talking a bit about this cost-benefit analysis that we do for firms. But of course, we also want to know what is in it for the apprentices and ultimately also for the state. So that's the second topic then. And finally, if they all have to come together, we're again at this public-private partnership, but again, I'm looking at it more from a cost-benefit side. So what is it in the system that makes it possible that firms are able to get a net benefit out of training? This slide, Eric also showed it. Just as a reminder, we're talking about this basic vocational education and training, and then you have all this permeability to different kinds of tertiary education, but we're again at this level here. And firms are entirely free to offer apprenticeship places, so there's no obligation for firms outside of healthcare. There is some obligation, but that's a separate story. Usually there's no obligation to train, but many, many firms do it. We have about 60,000 training firms in Switzerland. Eric also told you, many small firms among these, and they don't get money from the state. Again, with the exception of healthcare, they do it voluntarily. So there must be something in it for them, obviously. They put out an ad. They say, we have a vacancy. We're looking for an apprentice in this occupation. And then young people, with the help of schools and of their parents, they apply to it. And then they sign a training contract. This has to be approved by the canton. and then the firms are obliged to train. These are about 350 training ordinances where everybody can look in the internet. What do you have to learn in school? What do you have to learn in the company? What do you have to learn in the industry course or branch course or intercompany course? We use these three names for it. It's all the same. It's the industry course. So firms also can consult this in order to see what they have to do, but that is not a curriculum in the sense of telling you exactly what to do on a day-by-day or weekly basis. So mainly, you go to the firm and you work there and you learn the necessary competencies by working. And in order to make that possible, we have the professional associations. Sabrina already gave you an insight into how this works. And of course, the cantons finance and run vocational schools. So you see, firms voluntarily participate in this, but as you see with the blue dots, there are a lot of places where the system comes in. So we have special provisions for some sectors, we have approval by cantons, we guarantee national ordinances that are enacted by the ministry, we have vocational schools. That's all where this kind of partnership kicks in. Now, why do firms train? I think this is really a key question, because you see they have these apprentices like 4 days a week in their company. So that's a lot of time, and there must be something in it that is interesting for them. So if you say training, first thing really is firms want to use apprentices in their productive processes in a way that they are part of the workforce. So for instance, these guys here, they're working, I think, in a pharmaceutical company, and they are operating machines. And of course, in the beginning, you have to go with them and show them, but comes time, the idea is that they can do that on their own with only a slight supervision, and you don't need a one-to-one supervision anymore. So this means that the productive work of apprentices is very important, and it is in Switzerland, as you will see in the numbers. But of course, there are also all of these aspects of after the training. If I can keep my apprentices, they know my firm, they know the processes, they know the people, they know the market. So much easier to use your own apprentices as skilled workers than recruit them from the outside, because then you will have to invest in these people, and for maybe a year or so, they're not yet fully productive. Of course, you can also pick the best apprentices. This is also very interesting for firms. So it's kind of also a screening period. You observe them for 3 years, and you can then offer a contract to those that are best. And what we also see is that many apprentices are very proud to be part of a firm. So they like to stay, and they want to stay with you because they've been wearing your clothes for 3 years, and they identify with the occupation, but also with your enterprise. And finally, of course, by offering training, you can have synergies with the continuing training, further training of your other staff, of adults. It can have positive effects on your innovation capacity when they learn things in school or in training centers, for instance, but also from their colleagues about new machinery, new software, things like that. And it increases your reputation with clients, but also with, for instance, when you have to recruit on the labor market, you can show people, look, we care for our workers because we also train young workers. And of course, within Switzerland, if you talk to firms, they also often talk about social responsibility, because the people there themselves often have done an apprenticeship. They feel like, I want to give a chance also to young people and offer them an apprenticeship because someone has trained me in the past. It's a tradition, of course, probably, if it's were only about this social responsibility, it wouldn't work, because firms want to earn money, so there must also be an economic side to this story. What we did to find out whether this is true, we had a random draw of companies in Switzerland. Last time, or the data I show is from spring 2017. We've done this again, but it's not yet published. It's an online survey where we asked a lot of questions on the costs and the benefits of training. We'll publish the new report mid-November, and that's new, that it will be in English. So people that are really interested in that can read exactly how we did the survey, what we asked, and so on. The challenge is we want to know from firms all over in different sectors, and it's not obvious how to ask that, because the situation is very different in different sectors with different occupations. So it's not an easy questionnaire, but the basic principles are clear. So the gross cost is, of course, the apprentice's wages, and it's the wage cost of the personnel that is doing the training. Now, often these are part-time people, so they have a normal job, and in addition, they also do the training for the apprentices. And at this time, they're not fully productive. So we need to know how much time they spend working with the apprentices and not being fully productive, and that's the cost for the firm. And then there are, of course, administrative costs, machine, material. This is, in most occupations, this is less important, but to have the full cost, you, of course, need to cover this. It's more difficult to find out about productive contribution of the apprentices. Often they're doing teamwork and you do not have direct billing to the customers. So how do you calculate that? Our idea is, if it's productive work, then if the apprentices don't do it, then unskilled or skilled workers in your firm will have to do it. So we calculate what would be the cost of letting this work do by unskilled or skilled workers, and that's kind of what you save through the work of the apprentices. So we ask them, how much time do the apprentices perform unskilled tasks, and we multiply this with the wage of unskilled workers, and how much time do they spend with skilled tasks. This increases with the time they're in the company, so second, third year they do more skilled tasks, and we multiply this with wage of skilled workers, but often they're not as fast, they still make some mistakes, so you need to have a level of performance which corrects this, because the skilled workers are faster, so you do not overestimate the contribution of apprentices. So that's how we measure the productive output of apprentices, and then we take the difference between this productive output and the gross costs, and that's the net benefit. And then, of course, as you saw, we have these other benefits after the training, which accrue from retaining your own apprentices, and that is difficult to monetize. So we cannot calculate everything, but what we can do is look at what are actually the costs of recruitment and instruction if I want to hire a skilled worker from the external labor market. So that's also very expensive in many domains if I need specialized workers. And I can save these costs by hiring my own apprentices who already know the company, the processes, and so on. Okay, so we asked 5,700 training companies. We don't need the non-training companies this time. And the average net benefit per year and apprentice is 3,000 Swiss francs for firms. Meaning a majority of apprenticeships are beneficial for firms, but there is a minority that is not, and I'm going to talk about that also. But remember, if I say net benefits, this is only the productive output in terms of benefits. All the other benefits of keeping the people, of having synergies with continuing training, and so on, are not included in that number. So that's the split up. Here you see the gross costs. It's about 28,000 Swiss francs per year, mainly apprentice wages. In Swiss terms, they're quite low, right? They are about a fifth of the salary of skilled workers. So not very high, but still they amount to some to a number. Then we have the personnel wage costs, and we have the other costs. And then we have the productive output, that is what they work, and you see that is 31,000 Swiss francs. So they cover all, by working hard in the companies, they cover all the costs of the companies. That's basically the main training motive of Swiss firms. So they really use them as a workforce, but the important thing is that they're not just cheap labor, but that they're also successful in the end as a skilled worker. And that happens through learning in the firm, learning by doing, and more taking over the skilled tasks and not just the unskilled tasks that you can well do when you start off. So Sabrina said, like peeling carrots, that's what you do in the beginning, but you shouldn't stop there, right? Should become a master chef or a chef, it is. And it means that you have to go on to learn all the other stuff also. How do host companies themselves see their costs and benefits? Here we ask an open question. So benefits can be everything. It can be these productive output, but it can also be the other benefits that firms have. And you see that it's really blue here. So quite some are very satisfied. A majority is rather satisfied. Some are not really certain, and a very small number of firms is really dissatisfied. So they agree that the cost-benefit side is quite well balanced for themselves. And if we project this to the national level to see what it means for the economy, you here see the gross costs projected for all Swiss training firms. This is 5 billion Swiss francs that they invest in apprenticeship training, only basic training. And again, of course, this is necessarily so because you saw the averages. The apprentices work for an even higher amount, so their productive output has a value of 5.6 billion Swiss francs. So you can also say they're actually a real, how do you say that? They contribute value to our GDP. Okay, now that was the averages. I mean, and these numbers are nice, but of course you do not see behind how they come about. And if you look at the occupations, you see there's huge differences between occupations. So these are net benefits for 3-year occupations, and these are net benefits for 4-year occupations. Here you see even starker contrasts. So I talk shortly about how that comes about. Electrician, we had your colleague speaking. I'm not sure anymore where he, was it Arthurs or what was his name? Yes, exactly. Speaking about electricians. So this is super beneficial. Why is that the case? Because they can help at the construction site immediately. You always have to carry around stuff. You have to put in cables. Then you need somebody that shoves it in here and somebody that pulls it out there. So you need to be two. So it's always like they can start being productive very fast. And then with time, they learn to do also the real stuff, the electrician part and not just the unskilled part. But still, they're in the productive team. From day one, they go to the construction site. They're together with some senior worker. And they learn how to do these things until in the 4th year they can do everything that an electrician needs to know. And that's very helpful. Carpenter is similar. There's always work to do that they can do, and they learn more and more and can do more work. It's much more difficult with some technical occupations. Polymechanic, that's something like a machine technician. The poly comes from the idea that we merge together different kinds of mechanical occupations to make this a broader occupation. So in our machine and metal industry, electronics industry, they need a lot of polymechanics. And those you cannot really use right from start. So first thing is they have to learn the techniques of how to make metal pieces. Nowadays, that is not a big part anymore, but you still need to have this craft or the knowledge of how to do that. So they learn that. And then they learn how to operate CNC machinery or really big machines. And there again, first you have to really show them, because if this goes wrong, it's going to be expensive. So that's why firms have to invest. But these are usually also quite big firms who are ready to invest because they have a huge lack of skilled labor. So in machine industry, if you want to hire somebody from the external market, it's difficult to find the person that you need because they know a completely different kind of machinery, and it's not the same as in your firm because this firm is usually highly specialized. So you train an apprentice and he knows your firm, your machinery, your production process. And that's why they invest. And they keep some net costs. I think, if I am not mistaken, in the third and fourth year, this occupation is also beneficial, but it doesn't cover all the costs that run up in the first 2 years. But then you can keep them on, right? So that's really an investment in your own workers. So that's what we also try to calculate is hiring costs for external hires. You see, it depends a bit on the size of your firm, but we speak about, on average, 20,000 to find the skilled workers. So putting out the ads, screening all the CVs, talking to a bunch of people, and then selecting one, then introducing to your firm. It's very expensive. In case of polymechanics, this is above 30,000 Swiss francs. So it easily covers, if you can save these costs by acquiring or retaining your own apprentice, it's easy to cover all the cost that you had. And these firms, if you go to them, they clearly tell you that that's their main objective, and that's why they are doing it. Yes, of course, if we talk about firms and we say, do I have the time somewhere so I know? 3 o'clock. Have I been speaking half an hour already? Really? Okay. So the system is, of course, important. I'm going to talk about that some more. You know, the German type system, right? Very similar to the Swiss system, but it is not the same. There are some differences in the governance of the system, but there are also huge differences on the labor market. Labor markets in Switzerland are very competitive. People move around a lot. They don't do that in Germany because there are firing laws, stronger trade unions, there are collective agreements that limit the mobility of people, there are firm councils who can object to new hires, so that it's much less mobility in Germany. So in Germany, most firms are like polymechanic firms in Switzerland. They want this. They want either to be sure that they have the right people, and they also want to screen people, because once you have them, you cannot fire them anymore. So you want to be sure to pick someone who is really good. So you do the screening with apprenticeships. So firms in Germany invest heavily, whereas Swiss firms make sure that the productive contribution is high so that they don't keep any costs on average. But it has to do with wages. So German and Swiss wages for apprentices are almost equal, but our skilled wages are much higher. So if we introduce the German wage system, already our net benefits turn into net costs. Then we have less holidays than the Germans have and work longer working hours. That adds some more costs. And then in Germany, they do much more exercises before they are used productively. And in Swiss firms, they're used productively right from the start as much as possible. And if you change that, the tasks that you give them, productive or rather unproductive, then a Swiss firm would have the same, even a bit more costs than a German firm. And this is just the other thing we would, if we give a German firm Swiss wages, Swiss presence in firms, and Swiss tasks, there will be net benefits in Germany. So you see how much both things like presence, tasks, but also the labor market in terms of wages matter for this. And of course, if we are talking about implementing something like this in Latvia, then we also have to talk about wages, about tasks, and what firms are doing. So in order to set up a calculation also for Latvian firms. So how can we use this cost-benefit analysis? Yes, please.
Just a word by it. This, then the student already go into the market, or this is the
apprentice. Yes, this is the apprentice, and that's the firm cost and benefit. So this is now, I think I calculated. Yeah, this is an older. This is not a 3,200 because it's euro, but also because it's an earlier study. So the numbers, but this is the net benefit, the average net benefit in Switzerland, so for the company, and this is the net cost for the company in Germany. Yes, so they have much more training centers and exercises, and in Germany it's also really a debate about, can we use apprentices productively? They don't call them Lehrlinge or Lernende like we, they call them Auszubildende, which means people to be trained. And the unions are very much saying these are not workers, they have to learn. Whereas in Switzerland, nobody has a problem with, okay, some union people will also, but in principle, it's accepted because we think it's best for the youth to be in the active process and be in the real working world, that is where they learn most. And that's kind of the difference. Okay. So, cost-benefit analysis, it helps us. I can show you the Swiss model, I can show you the German model. So you see that these models exist and they can be beneficial, which is nice to know, but not yet what you need. Then when you try to create a model that is closer to the economy, the cost-benefit model shows us which are the driving factors for the attractiveness for firms. So we can also make sure that in the development of such a model, we can try to put an emphasis on those aspects that are also important for firms. Then if we have not an operative vet system, but we have an idea about the model, then we can simulate together with experts that have developed the model and experts from the firms, from the sectors, to see how would the most important parameters look like in Latvia, for instance, and put that in our model to do simulations and see how this looks like. And finally, of course, if we have an operative program, be it a pilot or then a larger system, we can do the same kind of analysis as we've done for Switzerland. So there are different ways of using this model and thinking, and finally also the data, in order to look at it from an economic perspective, which is obviously not the only perspective. The pedagogic view is at least as important, but this is also important. Okay, that was it for firms' cost-benefit analysis. And now, how about apprentices? You might be worrying because obviously they work a lot. You heard that. So why are they doing it? I wanted to have a Mentimeter, but I thought there will be less people, so we do not have enough access, I'm afraid, because it's a free version. So I'm just going to do a yes and no thing, and all of you have to decide on yes or no. So don't be shy. I want to see your arms, and I leave some time for the translation. First question, do you think that the Swiss dual model looks attractive in principle? If you just look at what you've seen today, do you think, well, I like it or not? And don't be shy. Tell me if not. Who says yes?
Yes.
Who says no? They are shy. Some people didn't raise their hands, and now I told you, yes or no. There's nothing in between. Okay. Next question. Do you think that it would be a good opportunity if you had such a system for Latvian youngsters in this age? Yeah, still? Okay, nice. But now we have the third question. Okay, next time I wait a bit. I realize that some people are, do you think that you would let your own son or daughter make such an apprenticeship, even if they can go, clever, smart, they can go to university, but they tell you, no, I don't want to go there, I want to do an apprenticeship? No, in Latvia. But supposing there's a system, something like Switzerland. It's very hypothetical, I admit, but the thing is, of course, the son and daughter thing. Who says yes?
And
wow, okay.
We can include actually the grandchildren as well.
Because that's kind of like, for me, the measure of a good system is that parents are happy to send their own son or daughter there. Because you can say a lot about how great the system is. And of course, it's also leading to this. This is my son. Here he was 14 years old, so this is 4 years back. And as you see, it's a beautiful Swiss landscape. No, it's not. We're half Dutch, so this is in the Netherlands. And I heard Joris is even a name that you also know, right? This is a Latvian name also? Yes? Great. So for me, it's a Dutch name, but that's my son. And he had to decide on this. And so he was 14, lower secondary school. He gets occupational choice lessons. So they talk about this in school. What are you going to do after 8th, 9th grade? Are you going to study? If you want to study, you should do gymnasium. If you want to learn an occupation, you need to prepare and find out which one. And you have to do internships. So all the children are required to do like 1 week internships, usually in a company, to find out about a specific occupation. So my son went to a veterinary where they had to kill cats and throw them away, so he didn't like it. And he went to a carpenter's store, and he liked working with the wood, but And then he did gardening, and he loved that. He just loved it. And then we started to say, okay, next semester you go to different gardening firms to find out which one is the nicest, and then you try to get an apprenticeship there. And that's what he did. But it was still early, so many of his colleagues went to baccalaureate school, which prepares for university. And then he felt like, well, if everybody goes there, why should I not go there? And so in Bern, this is possible to do 1 year before an apprenticeship starts. So he went there 1 year later. So there he is in the gymnasium. He took this picture for me because I told him I need the documentation of your way because I need to impress publics all over the world. So this is his selfie in gymnasium. But he really, after some weeks, he came home like, this is so hard and I have to learn, sit around. That's not for me. I don't want to do this. So he finished it, was all fine. But a year later, he could become an apprentice. This is also a staged photo. He doesn't have his hair when he's working like that. But the rest is real. So he became an apprentice. He had done like 5 internships. This is not usual, but he had done 5 internships with different gardening companies. And he could go to the one he liked most, where they were very welcoming, social, helping him. And he's still a very proud team member in it. It's called Naturgartenleben. So what his motivation is really do real work. Be together with colleagues. And in that firm they have, they're like, many of them are 25 or something like that. So he feels still close, but they're adults. He feels needed. He has client contact from day one. He went there. They split up the teams, go to clients, and he goes with them. And they show them, do this, do that. And comes time, he can do more and more. Sometimes you have more intensive client contact. Usually that's not what the apprentice does, but sometimes it happens. You're with a worker, and the client asks, how about this plant? And then the worker realizes, oh, I forgot that. And they knew that Joris is very good at that because he loved plants. So he was like, do you tell them? And the client said, well, my salad, he grows everywhere in the garden. And then he said, it's not a salad, it's kriechender Günsel. I bet you can't translate that. But it's Ayuga reptans. I looked it up. Ayuga reptans is the Latin name. So they had the garden full of that, and they could. And so he already has, like a contact with clients, and he was proud because they needed him, and they were happy he could help with what he had learned in school, actually. And that's the kind of experience that you like, and very different from baccalaureate school, where you're with a lot of nice colleagues, but you're not an adult, you're not needed. It's a very different thing. Of course, also, it is important that you can do more. We have heard a lot about that, permeability. So because he likes to be very active, what he could do is first become a Vorarbeiter and then a master gardener and take over his own business. So you have to do some more years of experience before you can do that, because you have to have the experience. And here you learn how to run a gardening business. So it's not just about doing gardening, but about, bookkeeping and all the things, but situated in the gardening business. Or he also did the vocational baccalaureate. So during his apprenticeship, he followed some additional school courses. So he can go to University of Applied Sciences. He is now looking at these different possibilities. And at the moment, landscape architecture is something that would also interest him. So maybe in fall 26, he will start studying landscape architecture. For us as parents, this is really important. I mean, this is super important. We want him to be happy and to thrive, right? So this is important. But of course, for us, it's important that he has career perspectives in terms of education and in terms of labor market outcomes. And Eric already told you that the employment perspectives of apprentices are very good. What we did in a study here is we compared people that once did a gymnasium or baccalaureate school and people that did vocational education. And we don't care what they did afterwards. So in the gymnasium, most of those have studied at the university and even at master's degree. And in apprenticeship, many don't have a further education. Many have a professional education, so a higher vocational. Some have studied at the University of Applied Sciences. But even with much less years of education, their employment prospects are better because they're attached to the labor market. Whereas the people from gymnasium, of course, some have great careers, but there are a bit more people that have difficulties to integrate into the labor market. And then we talk about wages. Before I explain that, I have a look at the time again. Okay, 10 minutes to go. What you see here is over time how it evolved for the people. They all have tertiary education. These did an apprenticeship plus professional education. These did an apprenticeship plus university, usually University of Applied Sciences. These did general education, gymnasium with professional education. These did gymnasium plus university. So this is the standard academic way, the blue one here. And you see the range of wages that we have here in Switzerland. And the thing is, it's a range. This is the 10th between the 10th and the 90th person. If you put people in a row ordered by their wage, and these are 100 persons, then it's the 10th and the 90th person. And what you see is, yes, if you want to earn good money, then a master's degree, maybe even a doctor's degree, you earn the most, but you are also for the longest time in your studies. So there are many years you don't earn as opposed to these people. That's not factored in here yet. So this is just a kind of rent that you earn for your studies. But there are also those that are really far below. So university is not a guarantee for a good wage at all. So if anything is a bit more of a guarantee, it's doing vocational education and professional or education or university. Then your wage is a bit higher. So labor market perspectives are also really good. And yes, so my son has the possibility to continue working and think about his future. There's no real stress, but he's already earning some money, which is great because he has a girlfriend now and she lives in Germany. So he has to go there and he wants to spend weekends with her, and that's all no problem because he earns his own money now. So he's now a skilled worker. He owns 4,900 Swiss francs and will decide about his future. That's him after his final exam, some weeks ago. So the firm put up this picture of him on their website, because that's what firms do. They show they're proud of their apprentices, because this again is reputation for them, showing that they have good apprentices. He had a distinction, and so they could also boast a little bit about how well their apprentice did at the final exams. And that's a wall they built, a Trockensteinmauer. No idea what this is on English, but dry wall something. Yeah. Okay, that's a part of the apprentices. And then we have the state cost. Honestly, I think it's a bit boring. It's important, but a bit boring. Okay, we talk about 700 million Swiss francs that the Confederation pays to the cantons, and the cantons doesn't matter what all of these numbers. It's only interesting if you're interested in details. And the cantons spend 3.6 billion Swiss francs on vocational education. So the Confederation gives them 700 millions. They have to spend much more. So it's mainly the cantons who finance schools. That's why they have these numbers. Good. Yes, public-private partnership, or why is it possible that firms actually earn net benefits? So if you look at the financing, we had all of this. The firms are those that pay 5 billion Swiss francs for training and wages, but they get back more than 5 billion in productive contribution, and they can hire skilled workers that have trained according to their needs. The apprentice, they work a lot, but they earn a wage, even in the first year. So that's nice for them. And they get training and a valuable degree, an upper secondary degree, that is helpful in all of Switzerland because they can show that they're a skilled worker. And the state, of course, also spends money, but less so than for other kinds of school-based education, no matter vocational or general. For the state, it's more expensive if firms are not there. So for the state, at least, it's cost-effective. And we achieve 91% of upper secondary degrees per cohort. Swiss-born people, 95%. But we have a lot of immigration, and vocational education is doing a lot also to integrate immigrants in the labor market. And it helps to provide the economy with a pool of well-trained skilled workers. So, of course, this financing is part of the public-private partnership. So this is important, sure. But what is more important is that firms are really interested. One thing is, and you've heard that a lot now, that the associations set up the training plan. So we ask them how much they are happy with their training plan for the occupation that they train. And this is a very similar picture. A bit more people that are a bit mildly agreeing, but most of them think, yes, we can train beneficially with this training plan that we have in our occupation. And that's, you have also seen, again, this is gardening, of course. This has to do with the fact that part of the knowledge that they need comes from school and from industry courses, which complement what is done in the host company. So that's the financing part, but of course there's also the governance part. Sabrina also talked about that, about your role in the system with cantons and confederation. And that means we have many institutions in Switzerland. So we have there's a Spitzentreffen, which is the meeting of the top guys. It's the minister together with the top representative of cantons and the top representatives of associations who come together and talk about the goals that they have for vocational education and maybe the problems. And then there's one layer below, there are the experts of the education experts of the confederation, the canton, and the associations who come together, and where we as researchers, for instance, give inputs and show them what we find out. And they kind of try to govern the system in all of its dimensions. And which is really the invisible part, I think you mentioned it, is this trust part. So we have this consensus orientation in Switzerland, which means that people know we want to find a common solution. And you have to negotiate. Sometimes there's a bit of power play, but in the end, you do not try to just make political points. So the expectation is that you come to an agreement and find a solution, and that if there's a problem, you can talk to each other. Curriculum design, we talked a lot about that. But what is really important, this kind of training in firms only works if you have a training plan that gives you a standard, but firms are also free to do a lot of things how they think it's best, because their incentive is that you're a good worker, then you're most beneficial for the firm. And that means that your incentives are basically aligned between worker and firm. And it means if you understand it in the correct way, if you do cheap labor, then at the exam your apprentice will fail. Canton will come to you and ask you what went wrong. And if a company several times you realize, okay, they're failing, then they will come and do an inspection and maybe also take away your allowance to train. So on average we have profits for firms, but a huge variance. So that is what you also said, Sabrina. In every firm it looks differently. So it's really a very diverse system. You have further benefits for firms that for many are also very important. Use the CBA method to get behind these benefits and also to help steering the system, and hopefully also to help you develop a good viable system in Latvia for the newly planned programs. And you have good labor outcomes for learners. And finally, a public-private partnership that is trying to make sure that all of these benefits and good outcomes remain and can be updated again and again when technology evolves, labor markets evolve, globalization evolves, and so on. Thank you very much.
Elpakāju, pačos, jo. Tur es sotien sev baiņas.
Da.
Viss saka.
Thank you very much for the presentation. So, just two short questions, if I may. I noticed the bullet point in one of your slides, obliged by law to provide training. Mm-hmm. Could you explain a little bit?
Yeah, that was
you for me.
It was very much at the beginning, right? Here it is. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You want to know what it means?
Just to explain a little bit, what does it mean?
Okay. It means that you have a training ordinance for every apprenticeship. So in case of gardener, you can look up, it's a PDF for instance, and you can look up what are the goals that are expected to be met after 3 years of training. And there's also specified what they have to learn in the firm. So it is clear that the firm now is obliged to make sure that their apprentice will learn this. Of course, what you cannot do is that the cantons have offices that control, but you cannot go everywhere all the time. It would be extremely expensive. So the more important thing is, as I said, that if the young person has the impression it doesn't work well, can talk to his teacher or to the canton, and you can go have something like a mediation in order to find out what's not working well. If the firm is really trying to exploit, then at the end, at the final exam, this will show. So it is impossible, to say like, oh, it's by law and then it just happens. You will always have firms that do great training, really great, firms that do, yes, it's fine, could be better, and you will have firms that are black sheep or that do not do the good training. But I don't think it's any difference to schools. I mean, my boys, I have two of them. In schools, it was the same thing. Some teachers are just great. Some are, yes, okay. And then there are teachers where you think, yeah, but why are they in this occupation? They didn't learn anything with this person. And that's the same thing. The teacher is also supposed to be trained and do a good job, but they do not always.
Okay, thank you. And second question. So another bullet point. Curricula designed by occupational association.
Yeah.
And the question is, does the small companies obliged or how to be members of this occupational association, or it's free will?
Yes. In Germany, this indeed, for instance, they have a system with chambers where you have to be a member, and then they have associations that are voluntary. In Switzerland, we don't have any chambers. It's all voluntary. But the majority of firms usually is part of the association, and it is because in part, they provide services. For instance, many associations give you a sort of plan how you could do. They give you input and material how you could organize your training. Of course, every firm is then free, respecting the training ordinance. They're free how to do it, but the association often helps you doing this. So they give you a service. And the other thing is they're your political representatives. And I think for businesses in Switzerland, this is very important, because associations have a large say in our country on everything, because they're very well connected politically. So also here, if the state would be too demanding and would, I don't know, say like, oh, we're going to pay a minimum wage of 1,000 francs for apprentices, no chance in the parliament. So the associations are also kind of a sort of counterweight to the state.
Any other questions?
Specific, and we are not even sure if it's relevant for the Latvian context in the future because we are still designing the model, right? But you were talking about this vet baccalaureate.
Yeah.
So maybe it would be worthwhile just to say a few sentences about, the two ways you can go and where does actually time go off? Is it at the company that the time goes off, or is it from the personal resources of the...
Yeah, I think it's very relevant for the Latvian context because as far as I understood, your system assumes that if you go to the vet part, you still have the general education exam that allows you to go to university, basically, right? And of course, there is a trade-off of time here, because if you want to train people or educate them in general education, that takes a lot of time. And as you've been seeing, our apprentices are a lot in the firms. So if you have only 1 day of school per week, there's not enough time to get them at the same level as the academic baccalaureate. And that has always been in Switzerland. The academic baccalaureate is thought to be for maybe a quarter of the people, so those that are really excelling in school. And our idea is also that not everybody needs a university degree, simply because that's kind of like a very specialized thing, right? It's you go into start doing research, and I know what I speak of. That's very specialized, and sometimes what you do is not very close to everyday life, because in science we have a lot of interesting ideas. So it doesn't make sense for us in Switzerland. We think it doesn't make sense to train everybody in universities. That's why we have University of Applied Sciences and why we have this system here. So also for the integration capacity of the system, somebody can be a very good cook, gardener, but also commercial employee and so on, and do professional education training, and does never have to go through an academic baccalaureate. But to offer a midway, you can do the Federal Vocational Baccalaureate, and this is 1 year after the training. So if you've done, my son could have done 3 years of gardening and then 1 year of school here to do landscape architecture. He did it in parallel with the training, and that's very hard because it's he has 4 learning places. He had to go to school for vocational school in one place. He went to the vocational baccalaureate school in another place. He went to his firm, and he went to the intercompany courses. They're all at 4 different places. I mean, it made him very mature, you know. Now he knows our canton. He knows how to travel by public transport. It was a great experience, but it's demanding, of course. And he had to learn more, of course. So it was a really, really intensive time for him. And that's our hybrid between general education and vocational training. So that answers, I think, your question. But I think the really important thing is also you have great career chances here. And this is also for people, you restrict people's possibilities if you ask too much here. I know many people are super successful, earn a lot of money, but let's say when they write German, they make 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 errors per page. So what? They don't need it. They are masters at their profession, and they earn a lot of money with it. And these are trade-offs, right? How much weight do you put on skills, and how much weight do you put on general education for everybody?
It comes up some is then right?
There's then less time called be right?
True.
Thank you so much for the presentation and all the information. Extremely interesting and valuable. I'm very curious about the system that you've created, because obviously it sounds like it's a clockwork right now. It runs like a Swiss clock, right? Absolutely understand that there is, and it's very, very evident that you have fantastic collaboration between academia, between unions, between private sector, between other sectors as well. So I'm just curious, how long has it taken to create such system in Swiss? Maybe you can talk a little bit about context.
Yes. Yeah, that was kind of my start, right? So the idea that you have guilds that define what is an occupation is a very, very old one. And then, that was new. Okay, you have tractors, so we need mechanics who can work on that. But it was kind of like the idea was already there, so you can create a new occupation, and comes time, you suddenly have an association. Maybe there were mechanics in general, then there are car mechanics, then you have heavy machinery mechanics. So it's different. That happens all the time, you know, that this landscape is evolving. Now it was, as Erik said, in 1930 so it was towards the end of the 20th century that in all countries in Europe there was a question how to go on with public education. And in Switzerland there was the question what to do with this apprenticeship with a master, because until then it was outside of the education system. And then they started complementing it with schools in the evening, and then they realized, no, we need more, so companies have to give up at least a day. So we started doing it. It's not voluntary anymore. Now it's mandatory to do this school thing. And I realized, okay, we have to make sure these curricula fit. So they start working together, and so it evolves, right? And so we have had a new law then, I think in the 60s, and finally now in 2004, there was the latest law enacted where we integrated the occupations in health, in agriculture, in arts, which had their own systems kind of running next to the main system, and they're now integrated. So you have the same logic everywhere. Was not so nice, you know, for health, because health, they were very advanced in their kind of pedagogics and things. But it strengthens the wet system to have all the occupations in the same logic, because otherwise it's also really hard to know what is where and what works where. With 250 occupations, you need a certain amount of standardization and knowing where to go to get the information and how this system works. So this is really moving all the time. And yes, if you start from scratch, I think that's really a challenge, and you will have to find solutions that are adapted to where you are. You cannot jump into a completely system.